All right. Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning, good morning.
We're in this packet. If anybody wants a copy, I have more. They're in Hebrew. If you don't
I'll take
that's
one.
Okay. Yeah. This is one.
Right.
We mentioned last week that it's a very important thing to give other people advice. It's a very important thing to go get advice. And we were speaking a lot about people who come to rabbis for advice for things, and that led us to a number of conversations.
Is this working? Is it on?
This is on.
Okay.
Should be on.
We go to a higher source.
So that's what we were talking about last week. We spoke about loyalty, confidentiality. We got into that conversation. This week, I want to focus on a few other things. The first question of the day is, how do you even know? I said last week, it's a mitzvah. It's an obligation for a person to give another person good advice. Where does it say that? Where do we learn that from? From where do we infer that? If you were to look through the Torah, you won't find a source in the classic Torah that says you have to go give advice to people.
Would it be in the Gemara?
What about Yitro saying to Moshe Rabbeinu? I mean, it might not have been advice, but like he said.
What's advice? Right? If you find people who give advice, the question is, do I have an obligation? Why do you get involved? Why? It's not your problem. Let them break their head. Let them figure it out. What do you need to get involved for? You'll find very often that when somebody they come, they ask for advice, but your reaction is, I don't want to be involved in your mess. How do you know that you have an obligation to, yes, if they ask for you to get involved in their mess?
Well, you have a choice. You can say, yes, I can help you, or you can say, you know what, that's really not for me.
Very good. So here we're going to talk about, can I even help in the first place? Like I mentioned last week, that in my field, I very often, there are cases that I'm not qualified to deal with, and I say, I'm not qualified to deal with this. I can help you arrange all of your, sometimes you have to get a person in the right frame of mind to go be able to get help. Okay, that I can do. More than that, though, to actually, that's out of my jurisdiction. So I want to read you a quote from the Shaar Tshuva, who says, Chayav Adam lachshov machshavot, a person must think thoughts. להעלות עצות הגונות ומתוקנות לחברו. And they must come up with fair and useful advice for their friends. וזה אחד מעיקרי דרכי גמילות חסדים. This is considered, it's included in the category of doing kindness to another person. So just like you would give them $1, just like you would lend them money, just like you would invite them to your table, anything that's involved in chesed and kindness, giving advice is included in that also. Not always do you have to give up your money. Sometimes it's your talent. Sometimes it's your insight.
Correct.
That you're able to give to them.
What are you reading from? What is this?
This is Rabbi Peretz's book that we're reading from. ובשולחן ערוך ראש המשפט, and in the Shulchan Aruch it says, in the laws of tzedakah, so this is very interesting, in the laws of giving charity to another person. It says, mitzvat aseh lehalvot la'ani Yisrael. It's they use the word positive commandment because there are negative commandments and positive commandments. I don't like that term because a negative commandment just sounds bad. What's a negative commandment? Aseh means you have an obligation to do something. A negative, when they say negative, it means there's an obligation to refrain from doing something. So, for example, there's a mitzvah to keep Shabbat. There's also a mitzvah not to violate Shabbat. What's the difference? Keep it. You could sit in your house all day and not have a Shabbat experience. Yeah, you didn't drive, yeah, you didn't cook, yeah, you didn't shop, you didn't do kiddush, you didn't have a meal, you didn't sing songs, you didn't sit with your family. Then there are people who are able to do both. There are people who do one of them. There are two sides to this mitzvah. You have an obligation to put on tefillin. You have an obligation to refrain from eating things that are not kosher. These things are what they refer to when they say positive and negative. So in the active commandments, mitzvat aseh, להלוות לעני ישראל, to lend a fellow Jew tzedakah, ואפילו עשיר שצריך ללוות, even if he's a wealthy person, but for some reason now he needs your help. He's not the kind of person who normally wouldn't come to you for help. מצווה להלוותו לפי שעה ולהנותו אפילו בדברים. It's a mitzvah to lend him money, and there are times where the wealthy person doesn't come to collect money from you, rather they come ליעצור עצה ההוגנת לו. Sometimes they come to you for advice. You might not be the wealthiest person. How many times people come to me, they sit down, they talk to me about a business deal they're about to make. And the numbers they throw around in that business deal are numbers I don't know that I'm ever going to see in my life. And it's fun. It's why are you asking me advice? clearly they feel there's something I can give them that's not financial. It's advice. It might be spiritual advice, it might be some practical advice. Every person will find themselves in a situation where the way you're helping has very much to do with yourself, with who you are. With people know this is the one friend I go to when I'm fighting. This is the one friend I go to when I'm angry. It's the one you all have someone like that in your life, and you are probably that person to at least someone else in your life. And these people who come to you, this is the same mitzvah as giving charity to somebody else. You're just doing charity with your words, with your intellect, and that's a very high level of charity as well. I mentioned this in our classes online on YouTube on HaMaspik Lo Avdei Hashem, the guide to serving God. If I can be biased, I suggest the series. It's about 20 minutes each class. It's not a long class, 22 minutes sometimes, and there were probably a good 50 classes into it, if not more. And it's just a playlist. You press play. Now they're going up in video. The original ones are in audio. It's from Maimonides' son. It's a book on ethics, on morals. We were just speaking about this. That even though Avraham Avinu, Abraham was a very generous person with his money, with his food, with his tent, he wasn't just generous with his money. He was generous with his influence. Sometimes someone comes to you and says, "Hey, I need you to put in a good word for me," because they know that you have a connection somewhere. Now we're talking about places where this is a proper thing to do. I'm not talking here about put in a good word for me because I don't deserve the job, but you should get it for me anyways. I'm talking here about a situation where the person doesn't need your money, they don't need your food, they don't need your house, but you have something that can help another person. That's also considered kindness and generosity. That's part of being generous, says Rabbi Yonatan Halevy. Teaching somebody something. Let's say you have a friend who's going to... I'll tell you, when I was... Sometimes there are people in the community that their kids are in college or whatever it is, and they're studying for some big exam. And it's not once or twice or 3 times that my father will say, "Come, I'll help you study for your math test." My father's math is a very strong point. And I'll sit with people in Starbucks teaching them math. That's also considered doing charity. He has a certain wisdom that he can share, that he can help somebody else with. That's also a mitzvah. But I want to focus on 2 words here. 3 words. The Shulchan Aruch says you have to give people advice that are etzah hogenet lo, that is fitting to the person who's asking you the question. There is no one-size-fits-all advice that you can give everybody. Not everything works for everyone. There are different people that are in different situations that situation might warrant. Share with you a story. When a person comes to pray, a rabbi tells they should pray in the clothing, in the attire that they would wear when they meet a very important person. If you were to have a meeting tomorrow with the president, with the prime minister in Israel, well, no, you can pray. You're praying in your house. Pray. I'm talking about in a synagogue. You're coming to pray. How should you dress? Shulchan Aruch lets us know that you should dress the way you would dress when you were meeting somebody important. And don't come in your come in something that. Now every person is different. There's no law here. There's no rule. You can't make I would wear something different than you would wear. It could be that in certain societies there's more of a norm. If you're going to be invited to the White House, you probably have to wear a suit. I don't know what it would be.
I think
You'd have to wear
like a mensch.
That's obvious. You always have to dress like a mensch. But in prayer, if I'm coming to greet Hashem, I should at least wear what I would come to greet my boss in an interview. That's what Shulchan Aruch understood a person should dress to pray. So,
you mean like if you're going to synagogue or you're at home?
You're going to synagogue.
Okay.
So,
Okay, I should be a little less formal then.
there are times where your prayer is less formal in general. And those times call for different measures, different relationship with the I'm talking here about a synagogue. So, Rabbi David Aaron always shares a story that when he was in yeshiva, his
Okay.
Rabbi David Aaron, when he was beginning his journey in yeshiva, it was the eve of Yom Kippur. One of his rabbis came to him and said, "David, you have to shape up. You need to really connect. You need to be more spiritual." He said, he was so excited. The rabbi came to speak to him. He said, "Rabbi, how should I be more spiritual?" The rabbi told him, "You have to start wearing a black hat."
What?
And And he said, listen, if that's what the rabbi says is going to make me more spiritual, then that's what I'm going to do. So he went out, he bought a black hat, he was wearing it, and he realized that instead of becoming more spiritual, it filled him up with a lot more ego. Now he was looking down on his friends that didn't wear black hats, the people who came to synagogue, and it made him turn into a very negative person. So he decided he wasn't going to wear a hat anymore. Now, I'm not answering the question here of in which planet do people assume that wearing a hat makes you somewhat more spiritual. I'm not dealing with it because obviously it's not true. He stopped wearing his hat. His roommate said, listen, you can't just stop wearing a hat. It's an important thing. That's how you would dress. If you're a yeshiva boy, that's how you would dress. If you'd go meet the Rosh Yeshiva, you'd go meet a great rabbi. He said, go ask Rabbi Elyashiv. Rabbi Elyashiv was the leading Ashkenazi rabbi in Jerusalem at the time. He said, go ask him if you have to wear a hat when you pray. So he went to Rabbi Elyashiv and he said, Rabbi Elyashiv, do I have to wear a hat when I pray? Rabbi Elyashiv said, no, you don't have to. He said, okay, came home, stopped wearing the hat. His roommate said, I don't believe it. Rabbi Elyashiv wears a hat when he prays. He said, I'm going to go ask him. So the roommate went, he asked Rabbi Elyashiv, and he said, Rabbi Elyashiv, do I have to wear a hat when I pray? He said, absolutely. So he said, Rabbi Elyashiv, but my roommate was just here, and you told him he doesn't have to wear a hat. So let me explain to you. So when you came to meet me, you put on a suit, you put on a tie, you put on a hat. He said, you clearly consider me an important person. If that's the way you dress to meet me, how much more so you have to dress that way when you meet a Kadosh Baruch Hu? But your roommate, he came here without a hat. I mean, he didn't think that wearing a hat is important to standing in front of an important person. And therefore, he doesn't have to wear a hat when he prays you. What am I telling you? There's not one size that fits all. Every person is in a different situation. Every person has different beliefs. Every person comes from a little bit of a different place. And when you give advice, you can't just give advice what you would do, what you told the other person to do. You have to know to take another person into consideration. What is the biblical source for giving advice on a case-by-case basis? Just yesterday someone came to ask me a question. In halakha, I told them in this halakha we don't have a rule. Every case is judged differently. And they had a hard time understanding, what do you mean every case is different? There's no rule. So this is not an objective question. This is a subjective question. I'm not embarrassed. It has to do with birth control. Every couple and their situation and their place and who they are and how old they are and how many children they have and what they're looking to and what their financial situation is and what their medical situation is. You can't make a blanket statement for the whole world.
No, you can't.
And so halakha has always demanded that this area of Jewish law not be codified. You won't find it codified somewhere in the Shulchan Aruch. Because this cannot be codified because it is a subjective halakha based on every single person who comes to ask the question. We have a mitzvah in the Torah called Yibum. Anybody heard of Yibum?
Yes.
What is Yibum? What's the story?
You need to marry your wife brother if he died before without kids.
Other way around.
Your
You need to
husband's
marry-
brother.
Yeah, so watch. God forbid, not me. Let's make up a character. Shimon. Shimon has a brother named Reuven. Shimon passes, he got married. And before he had any children, he passed away.
Correct.
Reuven is a single bachelor looking to get married. He's Shimon's brother. Our rabbi, the Torah tells us that he should marry his brother's wife.
That's
Widow.
A widow. Right, very good. His widow. His widow. In order to make sure, one, that she is married, that two, that she stays in the family, three, that they're able to have children with that same... I mean, his brother passed away without anybody to say Kaddish for him, without anybody to pray for him, to make sure that there's a continuation of that lineage. Now, this is an entirely optional situation. If the man doesn't want to do it, if the woman doesn't want to do it, they don't have to do it.
Are they still doing it till today?
In the Sephardic world, we did it until the founding of the State of Israel when it became illegal. But we
I know of a few cases that
we don't
have
really
done it.
do
Yeah.
Yibum today. The Ashkenazi world
Never
goes
had
straight to Chalitza. They skip the whole process, and that pretty much seems to be
I know
the...
a family, but this was interesting. She had died of cancer and left 5 kids. Her younger sister ended up marrying him.
That's different.
But that wasn't
That's not
because
Yibum.
they were
That's
not
not
joyful.
That's not Yibum.
Right.
That's not.
It doesn't seem to me
What's
that this
with
is
the
done
slippers and
anymore.
one thing and
Yeah,
another?
with the shoes, they spit in the shoes. Yeah.
That's it.
I'm not talking here.
That's just for
I'm not talking about the process. I'm talking
Okay.
to you
The
about
process is ugly.
the idea.
So also,
So what happens in this idea? What happens if his brother is 50 and his wife is 52, but the younger brother is 21? Doesn't mean he can't get married to her. But what happens in this situation?
But the idea is that he will have a zera after him. So if she can't give him zera after him.
But
No,
if she's
maybe
21, then
No,
he
it's
he's 21.
she is
So
21,
what-
he's 50.
so okay.
Slicha,
Like
I
that.
understand she's
So why
52.
don't we swap the story? So she's 21 and he's 52. But make the story this way, if that's what fits the sensibilities better.
They say
No,
men
now
can
they
have
don't do
babies.
because
But
my
they both want to get married to each other.
Okay.
They're okay with
It
it.
doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because my son is 21 years younger than his wife, and they've been married for 26 years. So.
Yes.
Oh,
Okay.
wow.
So let's read here.
They
Let's
have kids?
No, it can't.
Okay.
The Vilna Gaon writes,
You have to adopt it.
in the Torah it says, "V'karu lo ziknei iro," part of the Yibum process. The elders of the town call him in, v'dabu elav, and they speak to him. And the Talmud says, what does it mean they speak to him? What are they telling him before this process? Melamed shemisi'in lo etzah hogenet lo. They give him advice that is fitting for him on a case-by-case basis. She'im hu haya yeled v'hi skena. If he was a child, so to speak, if he was young and she's very old, hu zaken, she's old, v'hi alda, and she's a child, she's young. Omrim lo, they tell him, ma lecha etzel yalda, what do you have to do with the young girl? What are you bothering her for? What are you getting involved in her life for? Ma lecha etzel skena, what are you getting involved in an old lady for? Depending on who it is, what the situation is. Kshu yeled, kulcha lech etzeh shekamotcha, go to the people your own age, go pick on someone your own size. What are you getting involved in the story? V'al tasim ktata bevetecha, and don't begin to open up problems inside of your home. It's obviously not just talking here about a situation of marriage, but from here you see that the Torah has a rule, and the rule is the brother should marry the previous brother's wife, but clearly not in every case,
No,
because in certain cases the rabbis are encouraged to discourage the couple from being married to each other. What about the Torah law? It doesn't always fit. It's not always fitting that every person wears the same size hat, that every person does the same exact thing. You have to know that every person, every situation, there's a case-by-case discussion that has to take place. And the same is true with any kind of advice. We mentioned last week all the advice about giving flowers and buying chocolates, and I know, Tamar, it's a good thing to buy flowers and give chocolates. I get it, but even giving blanket advice is not always going to work, even if it's good advice. Sometimes what works for me, it's not going to work for somebody else, because they're not the same people, they're not the same situation, they're not every couple and their own issues. And in general, it takes a person who's big enough to be able to see that even what I think is right for me might not be right for somebody else. Even if I'm going to give advice that I think I would never do, but that's what's going to work for them. That's what they need to hear. Sometimes you have to do it. Rabbi Mazuz, alav shalom, was the Chief Justice of the Muslim Supreme Court in Jerba, in Tunisia. He's a rabbi by day, Muslim judge by night. They appointed him to be the justice on their Supreme Court. He was murdered by a Muslim man. He ruled over one of the court cases, and one of the men was upset at him and killed him after the court case, and he passed away al Kiddush Hashem. But you have to imagine yourself in that situation. You're a rabbi. You're sitting on a Muslim court. You're ruling according to Islamic law, not Jewish law.
He must have been a very bright man.
Yes.
Had to be an exceptionally bright
You
man.
have to, it takes a lot to take yourself out of your entire frame of reference
Cool.
and say, they're not asking me what it says in the Shulchan Aruch.
No.
They're not asking me for arbitration based on the Talmud. They're asking me for their own laws, And I, in this situation, am giving them advice. This is what your Bible says you should do. This is what your teachings say you should do. Not everyone can even fathom being in such a situation. When priests come discuss theological questions with Rashi, because right next to Rashi's yeshiva there was a school for priests, a seminary, and they would come and ask him, Rashi, what does it mean in the Torah this? What does it mean in the Torah that? That's why if you look in Rashi, there are so many times where he'll translate a word into Old French. This was what he did all the time. He helped his priests study. They were starting to become priests. What is Rashi getting involved? You don't live in a little bubble your whole life. You're going to meet people that are different than you, and sometimes when they come to ask you advice, they're asking you from an entirely different frame of reference. And if you're not able to put yourself in their shoes, that's okay. That's a very human thing. But a person who's there to counsel, to give advice, and prepared to write this book for rabbis, for community leaders, for advice givers, they have to know that you really have to understand another person's world. We just had 2 students come from human diversities class, marriage and family therapy. They're studying. They have to, part of their curriculum is they have to go experience other religious groups. And it's very interesting. I spoke to them about it. When someone comes to you and they're from an entirely different background and you don't understand their background, you don't know, you're giving advice. So what? So don't marry him. But you live in a world where if you don't marry him, they might cut off your head in the middle of the night. So you can't give your advice thinking that the consequences are the same consequences that you have in your life. Someone who comes from the ultra-Orthodox community comes to his Jewish therapist. His Jewish therapist is Jewish. They go to synagogue on Shabbat. They maybe Yom Kippur. They even fast. They don't understand, though, the intricacies of the ultra-Orthodox community. He says, I want to go to the army. It's in Israel. It's what I think is good for me. He's right. It's good. It's good for you. I would tell him it's good for him also. But when someone comes to talk to you, you don't know that in the ultra-Orthodox community, decisions that you make for yourself are not just for yourself. You have 11 siblings that want to get married, that want to get accepted to school, that want to have jobs. And if you start messing things up, you might actually ruin it for the whole family. So this therapist has to understand that and know that even though you need to do what's good for you, they have to find a way for you to do it in a way that doesn't jeopardize everybody else in your situation. Because how healthy is he going to be when he does what he wants, but his family doesn't talk to him anymore? You solved one problem, but you made a different problem. And very often, it's our job to put ourselves in someone else's shoes, literally. What do they say? Before you judge somebody, walk a mile in their shoes.
Yes.
That way when you criticize them, you're a mile away and you have their shoes.
That.
Oh yeah, Claire, right, on their... Oh. Who needs advice? What kind of person needs to go for advice?
Somebody who's upset about something.
I think everybody needs advice.
Exactly. At some stage,
Everybody needs advice.
Very good.
None of us are perfect. We all need sometime.
We can't do it alone.
No, you can't.
So let me tell you why I love Judaism.
You love what?
Yadut, Judaism.
שמעתי משהו אחר. Advice is everywhere, and all Jews give it.
And it's unsolicited at all times.
Yes.
But I'll tell you,
Whether you want it or not. it's
You want
there.
to do that?
I love it because we're on the brink of heresy. We talk about belief so much, but we are the classic heretics of history of the world. Our rabbis were brazen when they spoke about religion, about theology. I want to read to you a teaching in the Talmud. Who needs to go for advice? Amu Chazal. En HaKadosh Baruch Hu oseh davar. Hashem, God Himself, does not do anything. Ela im ken nimlach b'pamarya shema. Unless He first goes for advice with His heavenly court, with His heavenly advisors. What does that mean? Don't imagine here paganism in your head. Don't imagine
That even Hashem
God,
needs
Zeus
advice.
sitting on a chariot running around to his next door neighbor's house. Imagine like a concept. The concept is that even HaKadosh Baruch Hu, when He wants to do something, asks first. As our rabbis tell us, when Hashem wanted to create man, He first asked
Let us
the angels, right? It says, let us make men, na'aseh adam b'dmut kitzalmenu, right? In our image, one God. One God. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu went and asked the angels first, do you think that I should create men? There's an interesting blessing that ladies make in the morning. Not all ladies. Many Sephardic ladies until this generation didn't make this blessing. Sha'asai kirtono.
The women don't say that.
Thank you, Hashem.
Oh, woman, thank you for not making
Thank
me
you,
a woman.
Hashem, for creating me
As a woman.
in your will.
As your will.
Kirtzono, as you wished it. And this blessing seems to have this feeling of, like, okay, you couldn't make me a man, so at least thank you for making me the way you wished. The Hasidic masters explain that this blessing is very different than the way you read it, or even the way classic Jewish sources explain it. There's a book called the Sefer Minhagim. I have it in my bookshelf. It's a Hasidic book that I've been very close with since I was in high school. It's an explanation of all the different things that Jews do, from why we keep Shabbat to why we have potato kugel on Friday night. And therefore, I always take a lot of the things in the book with a grain of salt, because Hasidim in general like to add extra value and meaning to things that don't always have a lot of value and meaning. Everything becomes Kabbalistic, everything becomes spiritual, everything becomes deep. But in that chaos of making everything deep and spiritual, there are some things that they brought to the world that nobody else thought about in the first place. Some idea, some spiritual significance. To this blessing, one of the Hasidic masters write, Sha'asani kirtzono, you created me in your will. What does that mean, you created me in your will? It means that when you created man, you had to ask first. So when Hashem created a female, he didn't ask anybody. He just created them. Meaning, it was in Hashem's will. It was his desire to create woman. By man, he was uncertain. By woman, the goodness that they would bring to the world, Hashem already knew that he wanted to create them. And therefore, it's a blessing of thank you for creating me in your will. It was your ratzon. It wasn't a thought that you had, a discussion you had, and then man was born out of it, but it was something that you truly desired.
Didn't he create woman because he saw that man couldn't be up by himself?
According to the Torah.
Okay, that man, hold on, what did you say?
Because man couldn't be by
Kehillat
a man
tov.
couldn't be by
By
himself.
himself.
Kehillat tov heyot ha'adam levado. It's not good for a man to be alone. We're going to see later on that that's a very mild statement compared to what our rabbis say about what is a man without a woman. Our rabbis, it is not for naught that in the old Ashkenazi Jewish community, a man who was not married was almost not a human being. You think a woman who wasn't married was nothing. But a man who wasn't married,
What
never...
century was this?
40 years ago.
Oh my.
A man who wasn't married didn't lead services, never got an aliyah to the Torah. If he was a Kohen, would not go up to do Birkat Kohanim. Was not married, he was a nobody.
Wow.
Because it is ingrained in this understanding of our rabbis that a man who's not married is useless. I'll read it for you, and in a week or two we're going to read the actual source, and we'll discuss that.
Oh, wow.
Today I'm not talking about useless men, that we'll leave for a different conversation.
Thank you.
Umikan ilmad, therefore says Rabbi Peretz, from here we should learn, Bina v'dat meborenu yotzer uvoreh et hakol. You can learn from the creator of the universe. What can you learn from him? Shenityeetz v'nevakesh etzah b'kol davar chashuv. That to go ask. Don't be afraid of getting advice from somebody. There's no stigma to having to ask somebody else for guidance. In there's a world that we live in where if you have to ask for help, what, you can't make your own decisions? What? Of course, a person's making a big decision.
Why is it usually the men who can't ask? And
Right.
Like a man can't ask for directions if they're lost.
You know what they say? They say that the Jewish people would have gotten to Israel in a week if it wasn't for Moshe Rabbeinu not wanting to ask directions. You know, it was it took him 40 years instead.
Yes.
I'll tell you why.
It hasn't changed.
My feeling.
Okay, I'd love
My
to-
feeling
Nothing's
is
changed.
that not asking advice is very much dependent on your ego. It takes a certain humility, a certain... I don't have to have the answer to everything in the world. Ego stops you from asking other people for help. Because what do they know that I don't know? What can they tell me that I don't already know? And women in general, it's not a rule. You can't make this rule because I'm sure there are ladies who don't ask advice either, and there are men who are always asking advice. In general, men are much more, they struggle with their ego in ways that I don't think ladies always struggle with. Men have a super inflated sense of self.
Maybe because they were in the workforce for many years and women weren't.
It could be,
Until
you'll tell me why.
recently?
It could be the nature of a person. I don't know what it is that, there are men who they can't handle that their wife will make more money than them. What do you care? It's going to your bank account anyway. What is the problem here? They don't know what the problem is either. It's an overinflated sense of self.
You're right.
And if your sense of self is dependent on your ego and then you'll never go ask somebody for advice because I'm a nebuch, I need to go get help with me. Of course, nobody said you're a nebach. Nobody said you're. Sometimes you don't have to answer to everything, and sometimes you're going to make a big decision. In general, when you make big decisions, even if you know the answer, it's better not to have all the weight and the burden of that decision on your own shoulders. Spread the burden a
I
little
don't
bit.
think it's only an individual thing. I think it's also society which puts that pressure on a man. A man has to be the one who, provides his family. A man has to be the one who protects it. So it's not just the individual person. I think it's
Like they used to say, real men don't cry.
Right,
And then they
right.
said, real men actually do cry. And yeah.
No man eat cheesecake or something.
what men don't eat cheese.
Reparatus says now that when you go get advice from a Torah scholar,
Men don't eat cheesecake.
No, real men eat cheesecake.
Oh,
That was
real
the
men.
name of the book in the 70s or 80s.
מתחלמי חכם שנחום במידת נהנים ממנו עצה ותושייה ואדוני יהיה בעזרנו. You should go to a Torah scholar who is not every rabbi in your neighborhood is the person you should go to for advice.
Yeah.
About it has to be the kind of person שנהנים ממנו עצה ותושייה, that people have gone to them in the past. They have a reputation of good advice givers. There are rabbis. If there wasn't a camera, I wouldn't even mind telling you their names. Who I can tell you that if a couple goes to get advice in their marriage, they're probably gonna get divorced. Just they have no sense of understanding in not understanding. They're famous rabbis that this is their thing. They go around talking about marriage, about they only make more problems than they do good. They're famous for it. You have to go to a person who has a reputation that they know what they're doing. Somebody maybe a little bit wiser or somebody a little bit older. It doesn't have to be an age thing. Somebody who has experience. Somebody who has a good personality. There are some people that live out their anger, their frustrations through other people. You have to make sure you go to a person who's a healthy person, who's known to give good advice. So what happens to a rabbi that someone comes and asks him a question? And he's never spoken about this topic. He doesn't know, he has no comprehension of this field.
He's on his own time. Sorry, exactly. He should.
So why did the person come talk to you in the first place? They know that you're not an accountant. They know that you're not a drug counselor. Why do they come talk to you?
Because they're not coming for the content. They don't need you to be the professional in whatever it is, but they need a sounding board. They need somebody who can listen and build the big picture for them. And for that, you need much less knowledge on the specific issue and much more on human nature.
That's called trust.
I think sometimes Or
Oh,
one they just need support. to talk to someone who they know it's not going to go any further. So it's just kind of a sounding board.
Can I read to you what my wife just said? Because she clearly learned this book before. Or she's just smart enough that she could have written it. צריך להכיר ולדעת את הנושא. You have to know the topic שעליו אתה בא לייעץ, that you're coming to give advice on. Don't give business advice if you don't know anything about business. Don't give marriage advice if you don't know anything about marriage. Don't give so on and so forth. You can make the list. אמנם, but גם אם אינך מכיר ולא יודע את הנושא, if you don't know this topic, you're not familiar with this issue, ונזקקת לייעץ, but you're in a situation where the person who wants you to give advice, this is what they're asking for you. There are times when people, sorry, I can't help you. Sorry, I can't help you. And they will not leave you alone. So what do? Nahag kach. So this should be your custom. Kaven v'hanche, guide the person. Et המתייעץ. ועזור לו לפרוש ולסדר את כל צדדי השאלה. Help him work out his question. What is he really asking? What are you really trying to get to? What are you really struggling with? That's something you can do. Help them understand what's bothering them in the first place. וכיצד לשקול נכון ולהגיע להכרעה לכך ולכך, and help them, don't make a decision for that, because you're not familiar enough with this conversation to, yesterday my wife threw something, a couple came to us for advice, she threw out a word, it wasn't even what she was saying was not what they were saying. She said something, said, oh, that's a great idea, and I'm saying, she didn't say that, but just the one word that she said clicked something in their head that made them want to make the right decision. And that's a good thing. Sometimes you tell the person, you decide, I'm going to help you figure out your problem. I'll tell you some people come to they have two decisions they need to make. There are pros and cons in this direction, pros and cons in that direction. And you could just, I'll help you weigh the pros and the cons. I can't make a decision for you because I don't know what's better. I don't know what's in your bank account. I don't know what, but you can make the decision once I help you understand what it is that you are going through. V'yeh ish ne'eman. You have to be what Paul said. Be a loyal person. שאל תגלה לאחרים דבריו ועסקיו של הבא להתייעץ עמך. You cannot reveal to people the things that other people came to talk to you. Then you'll say, oh, you know what? The other guy just came to talk to me about buying a house. Nobody knew he was buying a house. All of a sudden, you and you're trying to show sympathy or compassion, you now said a sentence that connected this person to somebody else that the other person didn't want them to know that they would buy you yesterday. Oh, the Goldbergs were here yesterday. They also asked about that medical problem their daughter is suffering with. What are you talking about the Goldbergs and their daughter's medical problem? Just, you could say, you know, there was another couple recently that came to speak to me about something. What? Don't reveal to other people things that other people told you.
I think people just like to talk.
They do like to talk.
They don't think
They do like to
that it
talk.
could hurt somebody.
But a person whose loyalty is questionable, people lose faith in talking to them.
But I think Marilyn has a good point, especially when people come for advice. They often don't need to hear you talk. They need to hear themselves. They just need that open space to
Have
talk.
to be
And
a
very
good
often,
listener.
correct, and we've very often filled that space with incessant talking because
Right.
we're worried we might not give them enough advice. We might not be doing. We like to make things good all the time, and very often people don't need that. They need us, like you said, to just be a good listener.
Right.
They need us to listen. That's,
It says, "Da'aga b'levish yisichena." When you have worry in your heart, the best way to get it out of your heart is to share it with somebody. Even just talking to somebody. They didn't say anything, they're just listening to you. It makes you really feel a whole lot better. It's an important thing to have a person in your life you can trust to. You can trust to talk about things. I want to read to you the last piece from this section before we actually get into marriage. This is just about generic advice. Hizaher na. Please be careful, says our parents. מלייעץ עצה שהיא טובה למתייעץ. Be careful for giving advice that is good for the person who's asking you the question. אך יש בה מן הרעה לאיש אחר. But it will hurt or damage another person.
God bless you.
thank you.
We have friends. No matter what it is,
Look at that punim.
no matter what it is that they're going to do, your friends are gonna egg you on and push you forward. Yeah, that's the best thing. You're always right in their eyes. You know those friends?
Yes.
Why do they always tell you that you're right?
Because they want to stay your friend.
They want to stay your friend. Behind your back, they think you're crazy. This one's always getting in trouble, always fighting with people, bad business deals, bad. But they're talking about you. But in your face, they don't have the guts to stand up and tell you. I had a friend who was a good friend of mine. And in our first year in Israel, he was doing things I didn't think were appropriate for him. And I felt that it was the only person that could call him out on it would be me. And I spoke, a few of our friends got together, and none of them said, now why should we tell him? It's not, we don't want to, why should we lose our friendship over his problems? He's got problems, what? So I took him aside, standing over the Kotel in the old city. There's a lot of nice places. I said, I want to talk to you. I said, I want to tell you that what I'm going to tell you might make you never want to talk to me again. But as your friend, it would be worth it for me for you to never talk to me again as long as I tell you this. Meaning, I would rather you listen to what I have to say than you ever be my friend again. And I told him this, and it was very hard. Some hard things he was doing, and he needed to be told that it wasn't okay and it wasn't befitting for him. Meaning, I think highly of you, and this is not good for you. And he was upset. And he is perhaps one of my closest friends. Because after that, he realized that everybody around him was just egging him on, and nobody was honest with him. Nobody was really a friend of his. And even though that initial anger came out, that initial, who do you think you are to tell me? But at the end of the day, that's what solidified the relationship.
Sometimes you realize it when you're a lot later, and you don't realize it, then you get angry, and then you have time to think about it and say, they had a point.
And this really one of my closest friends. There's nothing in the world that I wouldn't trust him with. But it started off in a very different place. You have to be very careful when you give advice. Don't just tell this person what's good for them. Make sure that you're not causing them to hurt somebody else. There are two people that are going to court against each other. And of course it's fun for you to tell your friend, yeah, sue him, take every dollar from him. But what kind of friend are you? Why would you want this friend to hurt somebody else so bad? Tell him, you know what, be fair. Get what you deserve. Take what what belongs to you. So don't hurt this person. For what reason do you have to hurt them? You know, it's a very interesting thing according to Jewish law. I'm not going to tell you what to do, just a thought. According to halakha, a person steals something from us, so we have a right to get it back. Maybe even double the amount. There are all kinds of different laws. In this country, there are all kinds of other things that you could sue a person for once they stole something from you. It was maybe someone damaged your reputation, maybe they made you lose a few days of work, maybe there are all kinds of other additional things you could sue for and you could get for, and you could. It was what's it called, Agmat Nefesh.
Defamation of character?
You can sue for defamation of character, and there are all kinds of financial consequences that come along with it. So all of a sudden, someone stole $1,000 from you, and you walk out of court. You got all kinds of emotional suffering, all kinds of. You walk away, $20,000 you got in your pocket. I'm exaggerating, but this is a good court case for you. According to halakha, you would only have been able to get, according to Jewish law, $1,500 from this person. According to halakha, you're a thief. Even though the judge ruled in your favor. So the judge ruled in your favor, you got back your $1,500, and technically the rest you have to hand over. After court, you finished. Because I can't steal from another person. According to my law, it doesn't let me do such a thing. I had an interesting thing happen to me now. I have in the synagogue, we have a curtain that sits behind me, so it has a different background. And then it has two stands, like this stand, this tripod, two stands that go, it's a photographer piece of equipment. And so I was looking for one of these, and they're very expensive, a few $100, and the synagogue didn't have a few $100 to spend on this. So I was looking on Craigslist, and I found that there was one lady who was selling a used one. She had bought for an event. She ended up not having the event. She wanted to get rid of it for $80. So instead of $350, $80. So we set up a meeting, Craigslist. We went to a safe place. I gave her the money. She gave me the things. I come home, and I realized that she sold me the curtain, the pole that goes on top, and one stand, but not the other one. Now this is a Craigslist lesson for life. You just got gypped.
Yes.
That's why you don't buy things on Craigslist. What do?
Check first.
I did check first, and I thought I saw two things in there, but I was wrong. One was a box that was empty, and one had something inside of it. So I reached out. I said, listen, I'm sorry, you sold me something, and it wasn't what I bought. And she, like a real man, said, I'm sorry, but I didn't know that I didn't sell you all the pieces. Let me go home and look for it. She went home to look for the other piece that she thought might have fallen out of the box. And she said she can't find the other piece. So, please, she lives too far away to drive back to University City. Just give me your address and I'm going to send you back the $80 and you hold on to this tripod and the curtain and everything else. To which I wrote back to her, I'm sorry, I'm Jewish, and I would not be able to keep your $80 because I took something from you. I took the tripod and I took the curtain and I took the pole. And the only thing that I'm missing is one pole. If it would be okay with you, let me look online to see how much the other tripod would cost, and you can return to me the difference. So I went online, found on Amazon one of these things for $20, used somewhere else. I have Prime, so I didn't have to pay for shipping. I got it a week later, and she sent me back a check for $20. Marlene just put it in the bank. Yeah, in the short
You're very
bank.
lucky.
Yeah.
You're very lucky because most people that are on Craigslist are real scumbags.
So this lady had a lot of.
Had that experience.
Say
I
no.
haven't had this experience yet.
Oh, I would never buy anything.
So let me tell you.
Usually you meet them when you're
I don't
going
think
to,
most.
when
I
you
don't
meet
think
them.
most.
You
There are
don't
definitely.
You know how
just
many
send it through the
things-
mail.
You know how many things in this house are from Craigslist?
Also, my
Don't you
my
drive
kids
to
and
them to
always
look at it and then
Yeah,
you pick it
of
up?
course.
Yeah, exactly. So what's the...
So,
People are people.
Never.
what am I telling you?
Never.
Not that I found it incredible. It was incredible, such an honest person who sent back $20 and but I was happy to be able to say that I'm not going to take your $80 back. I can't. I can't, even though you're offering it.
But there are other situations where you don't deal with an individual, but with a company. It happens all the time. You call them up, you say, what I got is faulty, and it happened to me. I said, I'll send it back. And they say, no, keep it. We'll give you a new one. Just keep what you have, because restocking is
So
like,
listen,
so this
but
you can take, you know?
what's the reason they tell you to keep it?
You know why? The shipping is more expensive than what the article
No,
is.
you would pay for the shipping, but maybe they're restocking it, they can't sell it, it's
too
more of
much
a
of a
headache to
bother.
them
It's
than
too
it is.
difficult for
So
them.
that you
Depends
can
on the
keep,
company.
right?
Very good. So that company is telling you, we would lose more financially or efficiency-wise
exactly.
by you sending it back to us. Hold on to it.
I do
because
that all the time.
You're right, and they have the right to do so.
The
She
question
also
is
has
not
the
they
right.
don't lose. For example, with the airline tickets, sometimes they have these flukes, right? They mistakenly instead of
Yeah, that's right.
$2.95, they put in $29.99.
They have to honor that.
They honor it. The question is, are we allowed to purchase those tickets? Meaning it was a mistake.
Oh, people do all the time.
But that's
Of course you do
probably,
that.
but
Never been
probably,
my
Especially on Dan's deals.
even
where you
see
can
Right.
be-
but
It's a
probably
website
they
dedicated to that.
calculated
Exactly.
in their
Very
Absolutely.
good. And now there are some companies that are just, they'll do this because they have a very high reputation of customer service.
Right.
And they'll know that you'll buy from them again because you knew they were fair with you last time. That also has value to it. And
Correct.
for them, for the 20, 50, 100, whatever amount of money you would send back to them, it's not worth it. Or they can't fix the thing anyways. It was made in China at some factory.
Exactly.
Just keep. You're right. She could technically tell me keep the $80, keep the product. I
No,
didn't-
but she's an individual.
she
so
was an
that's all
individual, and I
it's
didn't feel that it was.
But I can tell you that I do that so often in my business, you cannot imagine.
Well, you just tell them keep it and we'll
Keep
send you
it and
another
we'll
one.
send you another one. Absolutely.
Now imagine the scenario. Imagine the scenario where she says, "No, I still want to send you back the $80." Does she have the right to?
Yes, she does.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
But
she
I
has
felt
to.
that it was my obligation as a Jew to make sure that I tell her that as a Jew I want to do business fairly. I'll tell you why, we have enough of a stereotype in the world that we're cheap and that we're conniving and it's not true, but it's a stereotype that we have, and it behooves us to do whatever it takes to
And
make
that's
sure
why
that
I
we
keep.
don't
That's why I tell you to
perpetuate this
keep it a
stereotype.
little bit because of that very reason.
Shkolna, please weigh very carefully, says Av Peretz. את עצתך שלא תצא ממנה ובגדלה מכשול. Make sure that the advice that you give a person will not cause any negative side effects somewhere else down the road. To them, to another person. הפסד ורוע, loss or evil. לא למתייעץ ולא לשום אדם. You know how bad it is when you give advice to that person and your advice caused that person something bad?
Oh, that's terrible.
That's terrible. It would be wise for a person to try to give advice that won't hurt anybody, but especially not the person who came to ask you advice. Omnam, but there's a rule. What's the rule? מותר לייעץ לאדם טובתו ותועלתו בדבר זכויותיו בצדק וביושר. You are allowed to help a person get what they deserve. If you see a person and they're being persecuted incorrectly, they're being sued for something not correct, they're being hurt by something, of course, you have an obligation to tell this person, I'm going to help you get out, I'm going to help you get back what you deserve. That is, in the matters of truth and justice, you have an obligation to be just, even if that means someone else is going to lose, but in justice. If there's a person who's not paying child support,
I just wanted to ask.
yeah, you have to make sure that person does. But they're going to lose money. They're not losing money. They're not doing what they're supposed to be doing.
But some
That's-
some people could come back and resent you for interfering.
So that's true. But the person who came to ask you advice, at the end of the day, you're here to help them with their
Right, but
advice.
sometimes when you give them advice and it's the advice they don't want to hear, they get angry.
Very good. Which is why you shouldn't give everybody advice.
Well, you know, when you're in the coaching business, that's your job. You know, they're coming to you for, for you to coach them in the right direction. So it depends on, what your position is when someone comes to you.
Depends on your ego too.
You know,
No, but the truth is the only person you're dealing with is the one who's in front of you. Meaning that is your client. The other people, obviously you can't, tell the person to go out and murder or do anything that will cause imminent harm. But the only one who actually you must have the best interest in for is the client. Client. You can't start making calculations, well maybe it's gonna, the husband will end up in jail but this woman is suffering today.
Right.
And she's the one who came to you, she's the one who's either paying you or trusting you, so then you have to give her advice that's solid for her.
Right.
It's, Not necessarily so easy though.
No, it's not.
Like you said, people do tend to be resentful even when it's good advice for
Right.
them.
Yeah, they don't want to hear it.
Right.
It's tricky.
It is tricky. You're right.
And some people come and ask you for advice, but they really don't
And they
want
never
to.
listen back.
Exactly. They just want to hear what you have to say.
Or they just
Or
want
they
you to
just want
confirm what they
attention.
said.
They want attention. Yes, exactly. You've got to know the customer. You've got to know the person you're speaking to. You really do. It's not so easy.
It's like they come ask you, but they already made up their mind.
That's
Right.
correct.
Questions, so why'd you come ask?
Exactly. Exactly. It's a
It
very
goes back to
interesting
they
thing.
want to talk.
Right.
Or they
Need to
want
express
confirmation.
themselves.
Yes.
No, they want
People need to express themselves.
That's true. A lot of times people don't want your advice. They want you to say that what I'm doing is right.
Correct.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm.
What happened to your picture?
Last week,
Fell
we were
down?
busy adjusting it, and then at like 2 in the morning, I heard a bang.
Oh
I
no!
got
the
the
same
wall.
thing.
Yeah, no, so thank God it didn't break, but
You just never put it
we
back.
just didn't put it up because we needed.
I want to skip a lot of this packet because it talks to the rabbi. I want to talk about relationships a little bit today. On page Resh Chet, if you look at the top, it'll say Resh and a Chet. It's the last page. It looks like it's not the last page. It looks like this.
Okay. Got it.
לעשות שלום, it says. לעשות
כן.
שלום בין אדם לחברו ובין איש לאשתו. You have an obligation to make peace between people and between a husband and their wife.
Correct.
לעשות שלום, to create peace. What is peace? What does it mean when we say peace?
No fighting.
No,
No war.
no.
Everyone is
I
happy.
think it's more
No
active though.
words. No words between people.
Yeah, let's not get philosophical. She's trying to define peace. Define peace. What is peace? There are two people who were fighting. What did we do?
Compromise or some or
Who won?
Nobody
wins.
wants to win.
Everybody.
Otherwise,
Everybody
one
wins.
always not be happy.
If one person won, that's not peace.
Yeah. Compromise.
That's just called Da'alim Gvar. The one who was more violent, strong, he won. We're talking about a situation where you told two people you're fighting about something. There's a third option. There's a third solution. There's a way out. And that way out is X. Let's make peace between them. It's what you would call in English arbitration. Trying to help two people, mediation. Two people, you're not working out all of their differences. You're just coming to another place where both of them will mutually agree that it's okay for them to be. Maybe they, this one wants this one wants that. Somewhere in the middle. They found a place where they're both comfortable. לעשות שלום, to make peace, מצווה גדולה לעשות שלום בין אדם לחברו. It's a big mitzvah to make peace between a person and their friend. ובין איש לאשתו, between a husband and a wife. This שכרו גדול, there's a great reward for this. ומקבלו בעולם הזה. And this is one of the few mitzvot where you receive the reward in this world. When you make peace between other people. It could be that that reward is just living in a more peaceful world. There's a lot of stress and anger and frustration and negativity that just comes out into the environment around you when you're with people who are always fighting with each other.
Well, it's horrible.
It's a pretty, sometimes you come to a place, it's a family reunion and half the family's not and it's just tense in that room. It's like, when am I going home? When is it over? When are we going? If there was peace, you would already get your reward in this world, meaning that it's already better. It's already, now we could just breathe a little bit in here.
It's like a cloud
But
cover.
it's tricky because you can be in a place where there's no fighting, but there is a lot of pain.
No communication גם because there is no fight.
People shut down.
Yeah, whatever. I mean, it looks all very peaceful, and everybody
Everybody's
says, "Oh,
cold.
they're so look at this happy couple." But you don't know what goes on
No,
inside
you don't know what
their
goes
mind
on
and their
You
behind
have
closed
no
doors.
idea.
You don't know what goes on behind closed doors.
That's right.
You don't.
That's right.
That's a true thing.
Sure. והקרן קיימת בעולם הבא, you also in the next world receive a reward for making peace between them. Not just this world, also the next world. ובתלמוד ירושלמי כתוב, it's written in the Talmud in ירושלמי, סור מרע ועשה טוב. This is a verse from Tehillim. Stray from evil and do good. בקש שלום ורודפהו. Seek peace and pursue it. It's a famous Jewish teaching. בקשהו במקומך. Search for peace in your place. ורודפהו במקום אחר, and run after other situations in the world where you can also make peace. Don't just be content with peace. in your own home, peace in your own little environment, go try to create peace somewhere else. It's not consciously, was not a choice he made, has become a very famous mediator. He's always flying to us, Austria, Croatia, all kinds of places. When a rabbi fights with a community, when two big donors are fighting with each other, when schools are fighting with each other, whatever happens, they call him in, he shows up, and he won't leave until something's worked out. It wasn't something that he started, he was just a rabbi, and then it turned out that he had a certain feeling for it, and people appreciate that. And when he asked him, what's your business in Croatia? What do you go to Croatia? What do you... That's not your responsibility. So I'll quote this verse. In my place you have to make peace, and wherever else they want to make peace that I can help, I have to go as well.
I think sometimes, and not for our parents, but I think a lot of times it's easier to make world peace than to make internal peace. Because those are a lot of nice global concepts. You know, we love to like picket for peace, and we're going to sign up for the Peace Corps. I think when it comes to internally, with our own selves, waking up in the morning and saying, you know, I'm okay with every flaw I have, and I'm okay with every good thing I have, that peace is a lot harder to get to, because it's much more real. And that's a hard place to start.
You know, somebody said like everybody loves the Dalai Lama. I mean, he is like a real symbol of peace
you're
and
right.
whatever. But he doesn't have a wife, we can ask, right? I mean,
Maybe that's why he's peaceful. You have to deal with another person.
But this is when we're going to see soon that some of our rabbis tell us that marriage is the true test of if you get along with somebody. Not necessarily, it's not always the fairest test, but it's one of the greatest tests. The Rambam says two words which I want you to remember your whole life. The Rambam says, Gadol HaShalom. Peace is great. Peace is great. The greatest thing. Shekol HaTorah nitna la'asot shalom ba'olam. The whole purpose that the Torah was given was to bring peace to the world. Shneimar, like it says, Deracheha darchei noam v'chol netivotei shalom. Her ways are ways of peace, of pleasantry, and all of her pathways are pathways of peace. This is the Rambam's philosophy. Torah equals peace. If you see Torah that creates argument, that creates fighting, that creates strife, that creates persecution, that creates oppression, it is not Torah. It is the litmus test to test what is real Torah. Real Torah is peace. It's not some New Age Jewish concept. This is why the Torah was given to us. In the Rambam, you'll find that in the philosophy of the Rambam and his students, Torah cannot be fanatic. It cannot be extreme. It cannot be crazy. It cannot be radical. Because if it were, then it's not Torah. It's not. So that goes against everything that I've heard about so far. A lot of people think they're living a life of Torah, but they're not, according to the Rambam's litmus test. These words, Gadol HaShalom, peace is great, I saw in one of the most moving places, to me, might not be so moving to you. When I came to Yeshiva in Baltimore, there were many rules. There are a lot of rules. Everything's about rules. So many rules you wouldn't even believe that someone could come up with that many rules. But they also had funny rules. What I mean funny? You don't think they would really belong in the Jewish world of 2016.
Show me the play.
But in Yeshiva, they had rules about how you prayed, how you stood, where you walked, where you slept, where you ate, what time you went on campus. Okay, those are understandable. Then they had rules that weren't Jewish rules, but they were the rules that applied to their Judaism. For example, you did not have to be Ashkenazi to lead services in Baltimore. You didn't. You could be Sephardic and lead services in Baltimore. In the Ashkenazi minyan I'm talking about. But you had to pray with an Ashkenazi Siddur, which is understandable because everyone's going to get confused behind you if you don't know.
Yeah.
And you have to do it in an Ashkenazi accent. So
And if he can't,
you can't say Baruch Atah. You have to say Baruch Atah. Like that. If you don't say that, so you don't lead services.
okay.
Now for me, this was like unheard of. I mean, who cares? You don't know how to read Hebrew in a few different ways. You've never heard somebody else read differently than you. But this was a solid, die-hard, ironclad rule. You must read the way we read. It's our custom. This is our community. Blah blah blah. So I 5 years never led services in Baltimore. Didn't lose anything in my life because of it. But it has ramifications. It's your bar mitzvah parsha. You want to read it in the yeshiva. You're never home for your bar mitzvah parsha. You just had your bar mitzvah 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. You're already out of the house all those years. You want to read your bar mitzvah parsha? You can't. It has to be in an Ashkenazi accent. It gets difficult for some people, and I've seen other students struggle with it more than others. Rav Yosef was asked, so which accent is the correct accent? Which one should we get other people to pray in? Which one? So he goes back and forth. This one, that one, next one. And he ends off his letter and he says, more important than figuring out who's correct, the Ashkenazim or the Sfaradim or the Hasidim or the Yemenites, he says, V'gadol HaShalom. Peace is much greater than all of that. You're in a synagogue, you're all praying different people. So this one wants to say Kaddish in that accent. What do you care? Does it hurt you? Does it bother you? Gadol HaShalom, just let it happen. In my Beit Knesset, I'm very happy to say. So we have a set Sidur, we have a set tunes that we sing. Every once in a while you have somebody who comes and switches it up and does something different. And I am very proud to say that nobody in my community cares. Nobody bats an eyelid. Because why should they? Why should they? Gadol HaShalom, peace, this value of all of us should feel comfortable in the same place, praying together, growing together, learning together. That's a much greater value than anything else. And so if that's the value, then how much more so putting peace between people? That's a great Jewish value. To run after, to create peace, to make opportunities for people to get along with each other. Kol sheken harav l'anshei kehilato. A rabbi in his community. It's hard for me to read this because I struggled with this for a very long time. שצריך להשתדל בכל יכולתו לעשות שלום בין אנשי קהילתו. He has to be peaceful with his community. Also, people in the community have to get along with each other. And it's his job to say, two people are fighting in my shul. It's none of my business. Why should I get involved? What do you mean, why should I get involved? They're your kids. Like if two of your kids are fighting with each other. How much does it hurt a parent to see that? Now, not always the parent can do something about it. Sometimes it's out of their hands. But your community, your school, your family, you have an obligation towards it. You have grandkids that are fighting with each other, nephews and nieces that don't get along with each other. It's your family, this is your house, this is your obligation. Ben Adam lechavero, a person and their friend, ben ish l'ishto, a husband and a wife. ותפקידו זה הוא חשוב מאוד מכלל תפקידיו החשובים. This part of the rabbi's job description, says Al Perez, is probably the most important part of his job. Is to create peace between people. All the teaching and the praying and the Torah reading, and it doesn't count if your communities fall into pieces because people hate each other. What does it work?
You've got nothing.
We are small synagogues, so we don't struggle with it so much. You have these huge synagogues, like 1,000 family memberships, and they have high holiday services for 4,000 people. And there are cliques, and there are families that are the aristocratic families, and the other ones who don't talk to those people, and our grandparents have been fighting. We don't even know what they were fighting about, but we're keeping this fight alive until. If you still have such things happening in your community, it's your job to get involved, to try to put a stop to it, to try to make an end to it.
Yeah, who are you going to give the aliyahs to?
Who are you going to give the aliyot to?
Yes, that's the big.
You know what we did in my shul? I made a boy under the age of bar mitzvah the gabbai.
What?
The gabbai. He chooses who leads services. He chooses who gets the aliyah. He gives the blessings. He'll take the donations. He's in charge of it. Why? I don't know why.
He doesn't have a bias.
Well, first off, it takes me out of it. That's how I pray. That's I thank God
He
every
doesn't
day.
have a bias?
Doesn't have a bias. I'm not, God forbid, questioning or challenging any gabbai in any synagogue. But when you're an adult and
It's good always the
involved,
shamus that does
and
that.
you're involved in
Same
adult, you're involved in
the
adult
gabbai
synagogue
do
life.
the shamus.
You have a bias. You also have friends in the synagogue and people you don't like in the synagogue, and not everyone is professional enough to say, while I'm standing at this table, I give everybody equal care and equal attention and equal aliyot. I hate that guy. He didn't pay for kiddush last week. That one, he screamed at my daughter at school. Whatever it is that makes you upset, it's hard to remove that from. So somebody who's 11 is 12. What does he care? You are rich. You're poor. He doesn't care. It doesn't have anything to do with that. It makes for a much fairer Gabbai, and nobody ever gets upset at him. Like, oh, how come you didn't give me a third aliyah? Last week was my great-grandmother's yahrzeit, you didn't even remember. It solves a lot of problems already in the synagogue when you have somebody who really is impartial just because of his situation, not even... It's important. It's important inside of B'nai Knesset. I was once in the synagogue. There's a person I know. He prayed in a synagogue for 5 years. Never once was called to the Torah. So when he left, I said, go ask the rabbi why. He asked the rabbi. That was it. If the rabbi doesn't like you, you won't get an aliyah.
What did the gab?
If the rabbi doesn't like you, you won't get an aliyah.
That is not right.
You should have left 5 years ago. What are you doing there for 5 years?
Is that what the rabbi said?
Well, you're so surprised.
I'm surprised, yes.
I am shocked.
I'm not.
That's horrible.
I'm shocked. Never, not surprised.
We have to. This is a problem. This is a real problem. There are people who are bullies and they use their position to be bullies. And it's a rabbi's job to make sure that in the community there's a certain level of integrity. It's a mistake, you should know.
Jews are no different than anybody
Than
else.
anybody else. That's the truth. That's what we've been saying the whole
You
time.
know, the people that want to evolve spiritually and everything else, we have the book to do it with. You could be part of the tribe and not really, and show up and do
scum
all
of the
this
earth.
stuff and be the scum of the earth.
Yes, absolutely.
You know,
In fact, it can be even worse because when you misuse power, you have a very dangerous tool. If you're just stupid and you don't have any tools, so it's not so bad.
You're right.
yeah.
And you often find the people who, like if you have no authority, okay, so you're not being so harmful. Unfortunately, the people who are in authoritative positions,
Can be
they
very
could
harmful.
be even more
That's
harmful
right.
than the
Even
average person.
absolutely.
I want to read my last thought for the day. Because I've been reading a lot today.
But it's fun.
My last thought for the day. Two people come to you and they're fighting with each other. This one wants this one wants that, this one, they're fighting. כשבאים לפני הרב, when two people come in front of the rabbi, or two sides come in front of the rabbi, בעלי מחלוקת או תביעות זה, they're suing each other, they're fighting with each other, whatever it is they're upset about. משובח וראוי ונכון, it's proper, it's fitting, it's correct, לעשות פשרה, to create a compromise, ולא דין, and not to judge based on what is the law. I'll explain. He says, take the code of Jewish law and put it back on the shelf. Yes, according to Jewish law, you owe this person that, and that person, you don't get anything. And yeah, that might be true. But that's not going to bring peace. It's not going to bring peace. Two people go to court, and one of them wins, they don't become friends afterwards. Very rarely. The rabbi has a unique situation where he can convince both sides to come to a compromise. And even though that compromise is technically, I'm going to use the word illegal, but not in the sense illegal. It doesn't follow what the law says is true, but it might have been better that they should each lose a little bit and each gain a little bit and just have peace between them. Because then you kill two birds with one stone.
Correct.
Everybody got something that they wanted and they stayed friends afterwards. And it's the rabbi's job to know when possible to make a compromise, not to execute judgment. The Katav Tur in the Tur writes, Valav.
But not every rabbi is capable of doing that.
No.
So they have to know how to refer out.
Exactly.
The Sefer HaMitzvot writes, Tzechim HaDayanim, that judges in general should litrachek bechol hayicholet in all their ways and all efforts possible. Shelo yikablu alehem ledun din Torah. They say we never want to judge according to the laws of the Torah. Ki me'od nitma'atu alevavot, because today people can't really handle harsh justice. It's much better to create. We're talking here financial situations. We're not talking here murderers and serial. We're not talking here. It's probably better to come to a conclusion where everyone comes away somewhat happy. I lost a little, I gained a little, but we're happy. וכל שכן הרב עם אנשי קהילתו שדרוש לו שיהיה בשלום ביניהם ובינו. Because the rabbi is in an even worse position. Because the rabbi is not a judge. How often do you see the judge? You saw him once when you were in court. Twice you were in court. The rabbi, you have to see him tomorrow morning at services. You got to be there for his kid bar mitzvah. You're gonna all kinds of things. The rabbi is also in a situation where he might always be right, but everybody's gonna hate him. Everybody's gonna think that he's always judging too much. Is always Always there's some Shulchan Aruch somewhere that says, sometimes the rabbi has to know. It's not just about peace between these two people, it's peace between us. I have to make sure that they'll come back again. I have to make sure they'll pray here tomorrow. They're like, the rabbi's right, we accept the rabbi's decision, we never want to see that idiot again. That might happen. But what did you gain from that? What kind of peace did you bring to the world from that? They said there's a story about a man who's traveling through New York. His flight got stuck. He couldn't catch his next leg to Israel. So he had to find a place to stay for Shabbat. He didn't have a place to stay, so he went to the local synagogue. It was 20 minutes before services. And he said, hey, is there anyone who could host me for Shabbat? And we'll get, sure, come to my house, stay by me. He comes to his house, they treat him like he's a king. They bring him heated towels for his shower. They serve him a beautiful 5-course dinner Friday night. Synagogue, they wake him up, they bring him coffee to his room. Oh, wow, the whole Shabbat. He feels like he's a king. Sunday morning, the man goes to services. Thank you so much. I'm going to catch my flight now to Israel. And the guy says, okay, well, here's your bill.
What?
My bill? Yeah. 3 heated towels, $15 a piece. Your bed, the soap was a $10 bar soap. The whole calculation, $2,000. $2,000? I came to synagogue. Who wants to host me and you're charging me money? This is crazy. He said, I'm sorry, but I didn't tell you I was going to host you for free. You didn't ask me if it was going to cost you anything. I just said I was going to host you. So they're fighting. Yeah, let's go ask the rabbi. They sit down by the rabbi. And this guy says, whatever my rabbi says, if you don't have to pay me, you won't have to pay me. If the rabbi says you pay me, you pay me. You agree? We accept his judgment. That's fine. Whatever the rabbi says. They're sitting down. They explain their side of the argument. He says, listen, I asked to be hosted. He said, he'll host me. I said, yeah, but I didn't tell him it was going to be free. Here's the bill afterwards. And the rabbi says, let me think about it. He goes to his back office. He looks in the books. He comes back and says, according to the law, you have to pay $2,000. You didn't ask if it was going to be free. And you didn't clarify. He didn't mention that it was free, so the assumption is he has the right to charge you. You have to pay up. This guy begrudgingly takes out his money, pays him $2,000, and takes a suitcase, walks out of the synagogue. The guy chases after him, says, here, take your money back. He says, money? Money? You just took me to the rabbi. If you're going to give me my money back, why'd you take me to the rabbi? So I just want to see what a jerk of a rabbi we have over here in this community. Sometimes you have a rabbi who's right. He's always right. He's always following the books. But he's not nobody likes him. Nobody appreciates this person. And you have to know that part of your job as a counselor, as a friend, as a parent, is to make sure people want to come back to you next time, to make sure people want to be around you next time, to make sure that the judgment, the advice that you give doesn't just make peace between two people or it doesn't solve the problem, but it also it fosters harmony and love and care around yourself. And that's a very important point. How to give good advice, healthy advice, fair advice, not flattery and just compliments. How to give fair advice while still keeping your reputation, while still maintaining your friendships, while still making sure that you don't damage yourself by giving proper advice. That's for next week.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you, Rabbi. It was a really good class.
Thank you.
That was an interesting
You
class.
have to give advice from your heart.
From your heart.
Yes.
A rabbi say that words that come
Is it
from
the
your heart,
best advice is
they
don't
enter the
give
heart.
it?
What?
Marlene, can you turn off the camera? If you give advice from your heart, words that come from your heart enter someone else's
What
heart.
happened with